Imagine this. Somewhere outside of Barstow, California, a man made a decision that would alter the course of his evening. The bag sitting in his passenger seat said sugar-free, which at the time felt responsible, mature, health conscious. He had bought them at a gas station because he wanted candy. Don't we all? The gummy bears tasted pretty normal. Mostly, maybe a little softer, but not sus enough to stop. So he kept eating them by the handful, and at some point, you may as well eat the whole bag. After all, it's open. One wouldn't want to waste, would we? One haunting call echoed in the cabin. He knew right away it wasn't from the motor. It was his motor. At first, he ignored it. Then came a second noise. Lower, longer, more committed. By the time the sweat started, he was still 45 minutes from the nearest bathroom. And while this sounds dramatic, thousands of people have lived versions of this exact story because for a brief and glorious period of internet history, sugar-free gummy bears became one of the most infamous foods online. No one died, at least not physically, but hopes and dreams died. And it started a call into the void of the void for the void. Or voiding. Hi, hello, and welcome to True Crime Culinary, the show where we look at the strange history behind food, culture, psychology, and the moments where things go horribly wrong. And today is our first bonus episode. Hooray! Every month, I'm going to look at foods that failed, foods that panicked the public, foods that technically worked, but maybe should have come through with a stronger warning label. I received a request to talk about foods that didn't taste good, and it got me thinking about food failures. The very first one that came to mind is one of the more poetically recorded food disasters I could think of, the sugar-free Haribo gummy bears. Because the funny thing is these gummy bears weren't a mistake. They were the result of over a century of scientists, companies, marketers, and consumers all chasing the same dream: sweetness without consequences. So hold on to your butts and let's get into this story. Humans love sugar, like really love sugar. Like there are cave paintings of people stealing honey from bees. Love sugar. And I mean, there's a lot to love, right? Historically, sweetness often signaled ripe fruit, safe calories, and survival. Love that for us. Sugar means quick energy. Our brains are literally wired to reward it. The reverse is also true, FYI. Kind of how you never want to eat something that gave you food poisoning ever again. But a byproduct of sweetness is calories, which became a bit of a problem once industrial food production made sugar cheap, abundant, and suddenly available in absolutely everything. By the late 1800s, scientists were already trying to figure out how to separate sweetness from calories. And like many strange food discoveries, the first major artificial sweetener was found almost entirely by accident. In 1879, a chemist named Konstantin Fahlberg was working with coal tar. Yes, my friends, you heard that correctly. Coal tar derivatives in a laboratory of Johns Hopkins University when he noticed something strange. His hands tasted weird. Now, how many red flags came out of that sentence? I argue many. First and foremost, why is he licking his fingers after dealing with coal tar? I don't have the answer to that, but it lingers in the mind. Fahlberg eventually isolated the compound responsible and named it saccharin. Suddenly, sweetness no longer had to come from sugar itself. Because for people with things like diabetes, saccharin offered something revolutionary: sweetness without glucose spikes. During sugar shortages in World War I and II, artificial sweeteners also became economically useful. But over time, sugar-free products became tied to something else entirely. My nemesis: diet culture. So by the mid to late 20th century, America became deeply obsessed with low-fat foods. I mean, it was like low-calorie foods, diet sodas, and quote-unquote guilt-free eating. Entire industries formed around the idea that people could still be able to enjoy indulgent foods while somehow avoiding the consequences traditionally attached to them. As a kid, I remember wondering why everything had to be picked apart, honestly. Like, suddenly an egg, one of the more perfect things on the planet, was only good if you ate the egg whites. Also, I had a genuine fear of butter and didn't taste it until I was in my 20s. What a waste of years, sans butter. But companies became incredibly good at engineering the illusion that you had to kind of take food and make it less. Diet soda exploded, sugar-free desserts appeared everywhere, artificial sweeteners multiplied. Saccharin was joined by aspartame or aspartame, I will never know, sucralose, and eventually sugar alcohols. Ingredients specifically designed to imitate sugar while changing how the body processed them. But what beeth the problem with that? Well, first and foremost, human biology is not especially easy to negotiate with. For decades, food companies kept chasing the same impossible goal, all the pleasure of sugar with none of the consequences. And scientifically, they got pretty close. Artificial sweeteners could trick the tongue. Sugar alcohols could mimic texture. Food engineers learned how to recreate sweetness in ways that would have sounded impossible a century earlier. But according to research at the NIH, the gut itself appears to distinguish between actual sugar and artificial sweeteners. I mean, like mind-blowingly, interestingly cool, if you're a nerd. Welcome, nerd friends! So what that means, that even if the tongue is convinced that you are eating actual sugar, the rest of the body may not be. We're talking literally your intestines send signals back to the brain that say, oh nay nay, in the form of not feeling satisfied, or not processing the fake sugar the same way. No brag, but I totally have a friend who's spearheading this, and I will put her in the sources. She is super cool. But this explains a lot about the gummy bear situation, because these candies weren't failing at sweetness, they were failing at ye old digestion. And to understand why, we need to kind of talk about your favorite etol, maltitol. Maltitol belongs to a category of sweeteners called sugar alcohols, also known as polyols. Let us pray I said that correctly. Despite the name, they are neither sugars nor alcohols in the traditional sense, which feels super confusing, but apparently welcome to the food chemistry world. Sugar alcohols are popular in sugar-free candies because they provide sweetness and bulk. Unlike some artificial sweeteners that are intensely sweet in tiny amounts, sugar alcohols behave more like actual sugar structurally. They help candy feel chewy, soft, and substantial, which matters a lot for gummy bears, because the clue is in the name. They're not brick bears. So if you remove regular sugar from gummy candy entirely, you don't just lose sweetness, you lose the texture. However, when you replace sugar with artificial sweeteners, the human body doesn't fully absorb sugar alcohols. So instead of being cleanly digested in the small intestine, some of these compounds continue on their little journey into the large intestine, where bacteria begin to ferment them. For anybody who has ever baked with yeast, we know fermenting makes bubbles. And for a human, this means gas, bloating, cramping, and in larger quantities, absolute chaos. Sugar alcohols also pull water into the intestines through something called an osmotic effect, which is the oh-so-polite scientific way of saying your digestive system suddenly yeets everything inside of it. Violent evacuation, if you will. Now, to be fair, none of this was hidden information. Sugar alcohols had long been associated with digestive discomfort in large amounts. Many products even included warnings about excessive consumption having laxative effects. But there was one major issue, which is that people were treating sugar-free gummy bears like regular gummy bears, which, like, duh. Eventually, one product became the internet's first undisputed king of digestive regret. I bring you Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. Now, if you've somehow avoided this entire corner of internet history, first of all, congratulations on your peaceful life. Let me disrupt the peace for you. Second, I will do so because the reviews became absolutely legendary. Customers flooded online product pages describing experiences that sounded less like snack reviews and more like survivor testimonials. People wrote about canceling plans, sprinting through grocery stores, regretting road trips, sweating in meetings, questioning every decision that led them to that moment. Plain issues. And the amazing thing was that the reviews were genuinely funny. Not because digestive distress isn't, inherently hilarious, which it is, but because reviewers described these experiences with the seriousness of war correspondence and the care of Shakespeare's poetry. One person compared the sound coming from their stomach to a demon trying to escape. Others described hours of regret. And because this was the internets, the reviews spread everywhere. In many of the reviews, people said, "Don't do this," to which people immediately said, "Hold my gummy bears, I will absolutely do this." Now, to be fair to Haribo, the product wasn't exactly defective. The serving sizes did exist. The ingredients were listed, the digestive effects of maltitol were known. But like, who opens a bag of gummy bears and double checks how many you should eat and then counts out how many gummy bears you should eat and then only eats that many gummy bears? If that is you, please email me at truecrimeculinary.com and tell me if that's the only thing you count. Do you count anything else? How do you survive? The other thing to remember is that when people say sugar-free, they think like they don't have to monitor how much they eat it, and thus they eat even more. I can completely relate to this because when I was in college, froyo had kind of come onto the scene, and it was kind of this like ice cream without the guilt thing. And let me tell you, anybody who went into the La Jolla Ralph's came out with a 1 foot tall frozen yogurt cone or bowl, and man, I could house that and I would still be hungry afterwards. Mind you, this would be after we ate a Chipotle burrito, so like we could take down some calories. So despite this total chaos that the sugar-free gummy bears had unleashed onto the internet, we want to be fair to the engineers that accomplished incredible things. They helped diabetics, they reduced sugar products, they gave people overall more options, even if they had to be monitoring their backsides. Entire industries developed around these kind of alternative sugar foods. And what I remember from this period of time when like sugar-free, fat-free was all kind of the rage was like a fever dream that we could outsmart biology. TLDR, we can't. Because the sugar-free gummy bear disaster became famous because it exposed the limits of that idea in the absolute most hilarious way. Maybe that's why people were so obsessed with it. Not just because they caused digestive chaos, but because like kind of revealed that we're all human and you cannot outrun consequences. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't read you 2 of these reviews. So the first one is called The Hara at 30,000 Feet by Derek, and it was posted in 2018. He starts, "My flight was leaving at 8 in the morning. After awakening and trying to get to the airport, I forgot to grab something to eat. I usually take my time and do things in order, but not this day. I was traveling from Boston to LA, coming home from a work trip. I do it regularly, so nothing was new to me. I stayed in the same hotel and knew the time I needed to leave to get to the airport on time. During my work trip, I stopped at a convenience store and saw these gummy bears and thought they would be a perfect gift for my son, Charlie. He loves gummy bears and gummy worms. So the morning I was to head back to LA, I slept through my alarm. That never happens. I rushed to get out of the hotel and threw those gummies in my carry-on bag to make it on time to the airport. After speeding and filling up gas in the rental, I made it to my gate as they were boarding. I get on the plane and head down the aisle to find my window seat near the middle of the plane. I asked politely for the 2 adorable older ladies sitting in the middle and aisle seats if I could pass by to my seat. They obliged. The lady in the middle must have been around 80 years old, so it took her some time to get up and make sure she was holding on to something so I didn't fall as she stepped into the aisle. I thanked them as I sat and settled into my seat. Fast forward 20 minutes as we reach our cruising altitude of around 30,000 feet in the air. As I reach into my carry-on bag to grab my headphones, I see the gummy bears. Since I am hungry and need something, I decided to open them up and just have a few to hold me over until we land. I wanted to save some for my son, so maybe had 4 or 5. But I had 4 or 5 too many because once the bears had a few minutes to adjust to their new home, they began to work. It started out with a little cramp, which is normal with gassing on a plane. You do not want to fart on a plane, so you hold it in. It is airplane etiquette. It would come and go over a few minutes, so I thought nothing of it. Then it got worse. The cramps intensified, the sweating started, and I began to notice the older ladies looking over at me. About 30 minutes into eating these bears, my thinking went from, oh, these are just farts, I can hold them, to, oh dear God, not here. I have been a Christian my whole life, and this is the test. If there is a God, please help me leave this plane with my dignity intact. After waiting for the intense cramp wave to pass, I stood up and jumped over those 2 women. I could not wait for them to stand, so I stood up, my back facing them, and tried to shimmy past them. I think a toot came out because I heard one say, "Oh Lord, was that you?" After reaching the aisle, I waddled to the back of the plane where the least amount of risk would be. To my dismay, it was in use. That left one bathroom in the front. I looked down the aisle and saw my Mount Everest. I had to somehow keep my wet cheeks tighter than Fort Knox while waddling forward, whilst praying no one gets out of their seats. After 5 minutes of stop and go, I made it to the bathroom and was pulling my pants down as I entered the bathroom. The door was still unlocked as the sweet release was underway. I thought I died. I thought this was it. Even though I was on the throne confessing my sins, I thought my time was called. I lost count on how many knocks at the door there were. I must have been in there for 45 minutes, but I made it. I washed my hands and threw water in my face to calm me down. Opening the door, I saw the faces looking back at me. Apparently, the seal to the bathroom was not airtight, letting just the slightest airflow from the bathroom to the main cabin possible. There were daughters, mothers, and children looking at me. I could feel their questions and comments. What have you done? We still have 2 hours left. Please divert this plane. As I began walking down, the man in the first row of first class grabbed my arm. He said, "Hey man, where's your seat?" Confused, I told him, and he said, "Get your stuff and come back and sit here. You need this more than me." I was embarrassed and ashamed. I had family at home waiting for me. I recommend these bears to anyone, but please eat them responsibly. Also, that first one was rated 5 stars. The second one, 5 stars by Amazon customer on October 26, 2017. It just says, "Help me." Back to biz. Today, many sugar-free candies still use sugar alcohols, though formulations vary and warning labels are more common. Some companies shifted toward ingredients like, erythritol, which sort of sounds like a character from Lord of the Rings, which tends to cause fewer digestive issues for many people. What a joy! But the legend of the sugar-free gummy bears never really disappeared, because unlike most product disasters, this one became funny instead of frightening. Just thousands of adults collectively discovering that chemistry always wins eventually. And it is funny too because people consistently rate the gummy bears 5 out of 5, put these incredible experiences down, or, a 2-word "help me." And others are like, I must be part of this journey. Because if human history has taught us anything, it's that if you put a warning label on something and make it strawberry flavored, someone is absolutely going to test the limits. So that's all for our very first bonus episode of True Crime Culinary, looking at food failures. Regular episode will be posted on Thursday. Good luck out there. Until next time, stay curious and be careful what's in your cup. Check out our show notes for sources, hit that subscribe button, rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen. If you want to follow me outside of the podcast, check me out on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube.